26 Melbourne Terrafly runway heading runway 5. Clear for takeoff.
From Psychic Sundays to E.T. Contact and everything in between, this is Spaced Out Sunday's Cosmic Passport with host Elizabeth Anglin.
Check it. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Having a great show, guys. Smoke now.
You can connect with Elizabeth on Skype at 505-908-9558 and Spirit for Peace. Follow Liz on Twitter at Elizabeth Anglin and hashtag SpacedOutRadio. And you can connect with us on the web at spacedoutradio.com.
I feel the need for speed.
You feel it over and over again. We take you higher and higher and higher. You feel it over and over again.
Chills real now. Smoke off now.
This is the love we live again.
Chills real now. Contact. Easing up. Chills real now. Real now. One level.
Don't look much like Los Angeles to me. I knew I should have taken that left turn at Albuquerque.
Now taking you on a spiritual journey from the desert of New Mexico this Sunday night, here's Spaced Out Sunday's Cosmic Passport with Elizabeth Anglin.
Chills ready to take your prize. Contact. Chills now. Smoke off now. Chills ready to take your prize.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Merry Christmas evening, everyone. This is Elizabeth coming to you from Madrid, New Mexico, and this is Cosmic Passport. And tonight we have a very special show for you. Eric Markham, our science editor, and myself are going to talk about one of our favorite authors, H.P. Lovecraft. And why do we love him so well? You know, he's like a gift to those of us who have scary lives and feel like we're scary people. But before we go into that, we're going to tell you that we give thanks to everybody who's listening tonight, everyone around North America and the world, everyone at WQEE 99 Rock the Key in Noonan, Georgia, at spacedoutradio.com on Spreaker, on the United Public Radio Network, Renegade Talk Radio, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and on KTLK, the Fringe.fm. That's the Fringe.fm, folks. The home of Joe Roop over there, my buddy. We also want to thank our guitar god, Ron Bumblefoot THAL, formerly of Guns N' Roses, currently of Art of Anarchy. He creates the music that makes our Spaced Out Radio rock, the official spacedoutradio.com music. Thank you, Ron, and I hope you're having a very, very happy Christmas. If you are listening tonight, you can check us out on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like at Spaced Out Radio Show. On Facebook, you can follow me at Cosmic Passport with Elizabeth Anglin. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio, and tune us in on TuneIn. Download our shows from iTunes. We're also on RadioGuide.fm, TalkStream Live, and on Stitcher. And, of course, our website is spacedoutradio.com. If you go to patreon.com, we have some cool offers for you, our listeners, there as well. Make sure you check those out. If you want to take part in the show, you'll have to sign in to one of our chat rooms on Spreaker or in the chat room on Facebook at the SOR Space Travelers Club. If you head to our website, spacedoutradio.com, you can become an SOR Space Traveler. for just $5 a month. And we've got some pretty decent swag for our valued listeners there. In the meantime, please check out our news section, The Encounter, that deals with everything paranormal, courtesy of our editor, Eric Markham. And you can check out Dave Scott's latest blog there as well. And if you've had an experience you can't explain, fill out an SOR Sightlines report. Our researchers are ready to help you find out what's going on. Again, a big thanks to everyone listening in on WQE 99 Rock the Key. I hope you're having a great Christmas. And if you're listening to this and, you feel like an outsider, this is the show for you. This is SOR Family. We have the Spaced Out Radio family here. And you folks in Noonan, Georgia are part of it. Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas. Hey, your family there in Sin City. And the United Public Radio Network on 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and listeners from over 160 countries around the world. You're also part of our family. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. I hope this wonderful holiday gives you everything that you've been looking for. So tonight, what we're looking for is to give thanks not just to the dear Lord and Savior of some of us who are listening and talking, but to somebody who I was turned on to, at all places, at church camp. What? H.P. Lovecraft in church camp? Yeah, I learned about H.P. Lovecraft when I was at church camp, when I was 25. I had been doing alien abduction research at that point for a year and a half. I was tired out. It was 1991, and you know how old I am. And, we had this thing. You think that people who are involved in the paranormal and metaphysical don't get enough church. Well, in my family, that's not the case. I grew up being taken care of by pastors of the Methodist Church, the Quaker Church, the Evangelical Church, by friends and family all over at church. And my step-grandfather was the president of the American Baptist Church. So he had an inn at Lake Louise in Michigan at the American Baptist Church camp. And my family used to, with other families, get together and have their own church camp. And we'd usually have a professor from some local college come and teach Bible study. Yeah, because we were that kind of family. Well, at this particular church camp, I had already moved to Boston, and I was coming back because I was so tired out from the alien abduction research and from school and from working, and I caught mono. And so I ended up being sent home to rest, which is never a good idea in a family with a bunch of kids and a stepmother who's trying to figure out who's going to pick up the slack for her. But anyway, I was sent home, and I was having a lot of conversations with my father about the scary things that I was learning about my situation through regressions and about what I was going to do with my life. And I was feeling very alienated, and I was feeling like I was never going to have kids because I didn't want them to go through the scary things that I was going through. And, and I was in a blab about it frame of mind, so I was blabbing. And in the midst of blabbing, one of the kids from one of the families that was there with us, and it wasn't a lot of families, I think it was only about 4, came forward and he said, "You know what? What you're talking about sounds a lot like what H.P. Lovecraft writes about. You should check him out." And he starts telling me about H.P. Lovecraft, and I'm like, who, wait, you really get this? And he's like, no, H.P. Lovecraft really got this. And I'm like, well, who is this guy? And he goes, go get a book when you get home, go get a book. And so I went and I got a bunch of short stories by H.P. Lovecraft. And in those stories, I found amazing things. That this was a guy who seemed to know about terrifying situations because he knew about how much denial one could get into when faced with terrifying things. Because the first thing that you do when you're scared is go into denial. And he also knew about being an outsider. He seemed to know about being a scary people that other people would think of as a scary person. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. This guy really knows what this is about. And unlike, fans of H.P. Lovecraft, I didn't look at him like I was a fan, even though the writing is fantastic and the words are alliterative and beautiful and they flow. But I looked at him as a helper, like somebody who knew what it was like to be in a scary situation and to be a scary person in a scary situation. Because when I would talk about my situation, people would get scared. And even throughout my life, people have gotten scared to listen to the things that I have to say about my early alien experiences. And so, it was comforting. So I'm going to play, while I bring in Eric Markham from his now currently slammed position where he's working and doing this tonight, I'm going to play one of my favorite stories by H.P. Lovecraft called The Outsider. And to me, what this story gets into is simply what it's like to be somebody who is fairly frightening in the world without really wanting to be. So here we go, H.P. Lovecraft, The Outsider.
Unhappy is he to whom the memories of childhood bring only fear and sadness. Wretched is he who looks back upon lone hours in vast and dismal chambers with brown hangings and maddening rows of antique books, or upon odd watches in twilight groves of grotesque, gigantic, and vine-encumbered trees that silently wave twisted branches far aloft. Such a lot the gods gave to me, the dazed, the disappointed, the barren, the broken, and yet I am strangely content, and cling desperately to those sear memories when my mind momentarily threatens to reach beyond to the other. I know not where I was born, save that the castle was infinitely old and infinitely horrible and full of dark passages and having high ceilings where the eye could only find cobwebs and shadows. The stones in the crumbling corridors seemed always hideously damp, and there was an accursed smell everywhere, as of the piled-up corpses of dead generations. It was never light, so that I used sometimes to light candles and gaze steadily at them for relief. Nor was there any sun outdoors, since the terrible trees grew high above the topmost accessible tower. There was one black tower which reached above the trees into the unknown outer sky, but that was partly ruined and could not be ascended, save by a well-nigh impossible climb up the sheer wall, stone by stone. I must have lived years in this place, but I cannot measure the time. Beings must have cared for my needs, yet I cannot recall any person except myself, or anything alive, but the noiseless rats and bats and spiders. I think that whoever nursed me must have been shockingly aged, since my first conception of a living person was that of something mockingly like myself, yet distorted, shriveled, and decaying like the castle. To me there was nothing grotesque in the bones and skeletons that strewed some of the stone crypts deep down among the foundations. I fantastically associated these things with everyday events, and thought them more natural than the colored pictures of living beings, which I found in many of the moldy books. From such books I learned all that I know. No teacher urged or guided me. I do not recall hearing any human voice in all those years, not even my own. For although I had read of speech, I had never thought to try to speak aloud. My aspect was a matter equal.
All right, too many of you guys are complaining that you can't hear it. Christopher said he could hear it. Who can't hear it? If you are a bunch of people and you can't hear it, let me know. I have here in the room with us. Christopher could hear it just fine. But I have here in the room with us Eric Markham, who is a great H.P. Lovecraft fan. If you guys can't hear it, I'll read it live a little later on. Eric, what's your story with H.P. Lovecraft? Why do you love him so?
I don't know. I guess I loved him because nobody else did. I was the weird one for liking to read H.P. Lovecraft, and I have to admit it was a matter of judging the book by its cover, because my mom had some collected H.P. Lovecrafts on a, just in paperback, trade paperback. And I found the art on the cover so fascinating that I thought, I got to see what's inside this. So, fourth grader reading H.P. Lovecraft with the book in one hand, dictionary in the other, to make it through some of that stuff. But, yeah, I don't know. I guess I was always the outsider, and I always felt like I was a little bit, in a world of my own, and I just identified with H.P.
Yeah.
Still do.
And I still have to use a dictionary. I had to use a dictionary when I was doing this. I was like, what is Nepenthe? I don't understand. It's like, I should know because I love this story. And it's a balm to make you forget. So I'm like, what is it? Oh, it's a real world. It's there. It's an actual thing. But that is a wonderful thing about him. Now, you've done a lot of research into H.P. Lovecraft since you were in fourth grade, and what did you find out? What struck you about his life?
It was tragic. In a lot of ways, if you wrote a a romantic novel, tragedy novel based on his life, you'd have a winner. Because he started out, he was raised by a woman that loved him as her child, hated him as a man, as a boy. So he grew up with that whole dichotomy there. Yes, mommy loves you, but you're a man, so I hate you. She married a man that was a itinerant, he's a traveling salesman of sorts, and sort of a ne'er-do-well. The guy, his father actually died in an insane asylum, probably of tertiary syphilis. But his mom, Susan Phillips, was from a fairly, well-off family in Rhode Island. They were, they weren't the very top of the social ladder, but they were up there because the grandfather had, Whipple Van Buren Phillips had done, made some good money in business, so they were comfortable. And as Winfield Scott Lovecraft took off and more or less abandoned Susie and young Howard, they got pulled into the Phillips home. And old Whipple Phillips was extremely indulgent of H.P. It's like he let him, basically didn't make him go to school, let him hang out in the library and read, weird fiction of that era. So, he had a bad start, as far as for, getting ready for being an adult. Well, tragedy hits. Whipple makes some bad moves. All of a sudden they go from being very wealthy to just getting by, and then Whipple dies. So you've got this poor kid that's surrounded by a bunch of, turn of the century, turn of the, last century women who all have a pretty dim view of mankind in general, and this was the influences that he was raised under. So this is an impressionable young man who's not made to go to school, and when finally he gets into his teen years, they make him go to school. He has a nervous collapse and lives as a recluse for several years. So it's a trippy. Just reading his biography is a trippy experience in its own right.
To me, what I noticed was that Whipple had brought him tales. Whipple had traveled. He traveled to Europe I'm not sure if he traveled to, northern Africa, but he had brought back things to HP, and some of that makes a lot more sense why he put some of the names in the books. He listened to Arabian Nights, and so he talks about a sort of, North African Al-Hazred, and he talks about places in Egypt, and even Nyarlathotep, which is one of my favorite stories, and I don't know why. I think it could be partially timely for our time right now with climate change and a strange political system. But even that, it's like he's hearkening back to what his grandfather had told him about. And so it makes a lot more sense when you're reading it, if you know about Whipple, not so much his father, but if you know about his grandfather, why he wrote about the things he wrote about, because that's what he knew, that's what his education was, which in a way is sad. So I'm going to play probably a better recording now of Nyarlathotep. Is that okay with you, Eric?
Oh, yeah.
Nyarlathotep. Written November 1920. Nyarlathotep, the crawling chaos. I am the last. I will tell the audient void. I do not recall distinctly when it began, but it was months ago. The general tension was horrible. To a season of political and social upheaval was added a strange and brooding apprehension of hideous physical danger, a danger widespread and all-embracing, such a danger as may be imagined only in the most terrible phantasms of the night. I recall that the people went about with pale and worried faces and whispered warnings and prophecies, which no one dared consciously repeat or acknowledge to himself that he had heard. A sense of monstrous guilt was upon the land, and out of the abysses between the stars swept chill currents that made men shiver in dark and lonely places. There was a demoniac alteration in the sequence of the seasons. The autumn heat lingered fearsomely, and everyone felt that the world, and perhaps the universe, had passed from the control of known gods or forces to that of gods or forces which were unknown. And it was then that Nyarlathotep came out of Egypt. Who he was, none could tell, but he was of the old native blood, and he looked like a pharaoh. The fellaheen knelt when they saw him, yet could not say why. He said he had risen up out of the blackness of 27 centuries, and that he had heard messages from places not on this planet. Into the lands of civilization came Nyarlathotep, swarthy, slender, and sinister, always buying strange instruments of glass and metal and combining them into instruments yet stranger. He spoke much of the sciences, of electricity and psychology, and gave exhibitions of power which sent his spectators away speechless, yet which swelled his fame to exceeding magnitude. Men advised one another to see Nyarlathotep, and shuddered. And where Nyarlathotep went, rest vanished, for the small hours were rent with the screams of nightmare. Never before had the screams of nightmare been such a public problem. Now the wise men almost wished they could forbid sleep in the small hours, that the shrieks of cities might less horribly disturb the pale, pitying moon, as it glimmered on green waters, gliding under bridges, and old steeples crumbling against a sickly sky. I remember when Nyarlathotep came to my city, the great, the old, the terrible city of unnumbered crimes. My friend had told me of him and of the impelling fascination and allurement of his revelations, and I burned with eagerness to explore his uttermost mysteries. My friend said they were horrible and impressive beyond my most fevered imaginings, that what was thrown on a screen in a darkened room prophesied things none but Nyarlathotep dared prophesy, and that in the sputter of his sparks
there was taken from men that which had never been taken before yet, which showed only in the eyes. And I heard it hinted abroad that those who knew Nyarlathotep looked on sights which others saw not. It was in the hot autumn that I went through the night with the restless crowds to see Nyarlathotep. Through the stifling night and up the endless stairs into the choking room, and shadowed on a screen, I saw hooded forms amidst ruins, and yellow evil faces peering from behind fallen monuments. And I saw the world battling against blackness, against the waves of destruction from ultimate space, whirling, churning, struggling around the dimming, cooling sun. Then the sparks played amazingly around the heads of the spectators, and hair stood up on end, whilst shadows more grotesque than I can tell came out and squatted on the heads. And when I, who was colder and more scientific than the rest, mumbled a trembling protest about imposture and static electricity, Nyarlathotep drove us all out, down the dizzy stairs into the damp, hot, deserted midnight streets, and I screamed aloud that I was not afraid, that I never could be afraid, and others screamed with me for solace. We swore to one another that the city was exactly the same and still alive, and when the electric lights began to fade, we cursed the company over and over again and laughed at the queer faces we made. I believe we felt something coming down from the greenish moon, for when we began to depend on its light, we drifted into curious involuntary marching formations and seemed to know our destinations, though we dared not think of them. Once we looked at the pavement and found the blocks loose and displaced by grass, with scarce a line of rusted metal to show where the tramways had run. And again we saw a tram car alone, windowless, dilapidated, and almost on its side. When we gazed around the horizon, we could not find the third tower by the river, and noticed that the silhouette of the second tower was ragged at the top. Then we split up into narrow columns, each of which seemed drawn in a different direction. One disappeared in a narrow alley to the left, leaving only the echo of a shocking moan. Another filed down a weed-choked subway entrance, howling with a laughter that was mad. My own column was sucked toward the open country, and presently I felt a chill which was not of the hot autumn, for as we stalked out on the dark moor, we beheld around us the hellish moon-glitter of evil snows, trackless, inexplicable snows, inexplicable to all, swept asunder in one direction only, where lay a gulf, all the blacker for its glittering walls. The column seemed very thin indeed, as it plodded dreamily into the gulf. I lingered behind, for the black rift in the green-litten snow was frightful, and I thought I had heard the reverberations of disquieting wails as my companions vanished. But my power to linger was slight. As if beckoned by those who had gone before, I half floated between the titanic snowdrifts, quivering and afraid, into the sightless vortex of the unimaginable. Screamingly sentient, dumbly delirious, only the gods that were can tell, a sickened, sensitive shadow writhing in hands that are not hands, and whirled blindly past ghastly midnights of rotting creation, corpses of dead worlds with sores that were cities, charnel winds that brush the pallid stars and make them flicker low, beyond the world's vague ghosts of monstrous things, half-seen columns of unsanctified temples that rest on nameless rocks beneath space and reach up to dizzy vacua above the spheres of light and darkness, and through this revolting graveyard of the universe, the muffled, maddening beating of drums and thin, monotonous whine of blasphemous flutes from inconceivable, unlighted chambers beyond time. The detestable pounding and piping whereunto dance slowly, awkwardly and absurdly, the gigantic, tenebrous, ultimate gods, the blind, voiceless, mindless gargoyles, whose soul is Nyarlathotep. So, Nyarlathotep. Did he steal everybody's soul, Eric? Or was he just the end? The Omega? That's the question. And if you were listening, the alliteration in H.P. Lovecraft is so great sometimes that it can just sort of, gently waft you off into someplace else. But, what happened to those people? Something controlled their minds. Something made them walk in formation. Something made them not see the world as it was, or see the world as it was. For me, as an abductee, we have had, through dreams, or through, maybe not prophecy, but been shown things. And one of the visions was of the world in the future after climate change, where there's a collapse of everything, and everything is falling apart. And people are basically being shepherded around by, military figures that are actually aliens. So, for some people, this guy wrote this back in 1920, and for some people, that's, it's no big deal. He's fantastically, wonderfully able to make up a great story, but he's talking about a being that controls people's minds. He's talking about a being that, in a sense, steals their will to live and steals their self, their ability to motivate themselves to do anything. A complete and utter lack of hope. And for a lot of people that I knew who were abductees who had some of these visions during their experiences of a world where people had lost hope, this particular story touches a nerve, because it is how people were acting in our visions, in the shared dreams that we were having. And some of us remembered each other from our shared dreams. You could call it the SQE, the quantum environments, simulated quantum environment dreams, if you want. But why are aliens showing us a world where mankind has lost hope? And then we have this guy in 1920 who's writing about a world where an alien comes and mankind, or something even before aliens come, and mankind loses hope. It's concerning to me that he was around in 1920 writing about this when I was in, 1990 going through simulated quantum environment training where this was happening. Eric Markham, are you still around, or are you working?
Oh, I'm still around. I'm listening.
So what do you think?
Well, part of where HP comes up with Nyarlathotep is he is a messenger for a much greater evil. He's the primer. In the background behind Nyarlathotep is always Cthulhu, the main, embodiment of chaos and what we would call evil. And Nyarlathotep is moving through the land, getting people's mindset, and, getting them brainwashed to be ready for the coming of the next great evil. And he's borrowing a lot of his early work on H.P. Lovecraft. He borrowed heavily from Edward Plunkett, who was wrote under his name of his title. He was a titled lord in England. He was Lord Dunsany. He was the 18th Lord of Dunsany, and that's what he wrote under. And this is probably one of H.P. Lovecraft's earliest influences. You have Plunkett, you have Algernon Blackwood, the great, Edgar Allan Poe. The great horror writers of the 19th century were H.P.'s bread and butter, and he borrowed these elements of chaos that these authors were introducing in their Gothic horror in the century before. And in fact, some of H.P.'s earliest work, it's hard to see where the H.P. is, it's hard to separate the H.P. from the Lord Dunsany. A lot of his early work is considered by H.P. Lovecraft scholars as, Dunsany light, or HP in the voice of Dunsany or Algernon Blackwood. It's just, he hadn't found his own voice yet in a lot of his early work. And he was an incredible Anglophile at that. I mean, he would have rather heard Lord Dunsany pass gas than to hear a modern, American writer, put out a masterpiece. He was that, he had such blinders on. So when you look at his early influences, you can see where he gets this dark hopelessness for mankind, just being basically, we're isolated from the truth on this little spinning ball, and we don't, there's this horrible, evil universe surrounding us, indifferent to us. And that's his message.
And I think it's in a way, it's a terrifying message, but when you're sort of facing that, it makes you feel better. That's what it did for me. It's like, I'm going through the worst period of time in my life, but look, it could be worse. There could be Cthulhu. And Cthulhu could come and be the evilest evil that there ever was. And you know what? Nobody's telling me about Cthulhu, so I'm okay. Everything is awesome. And we'll get through this. So one of the things that he was known for, you were talking about Lord Dunsany, but one of the other things that he was known for was like the title of The Color Out of Space, which is about a meteorite that falls that probably has all sorts of terrible Cthulhu-like life-killing life on it, or just deathliness. He writes it in the English word color, C-O-L-O-U-R. And was it that he was such an Anglophile that he couldn't do anything different, or was he making a point, or... He was
very much making a point. What he was trying to do is, if he had just wrote it C-O-L-O-R, your brain, our American English brains would have just said, oh, a color like red, blue, purple. By giving it that odd spelling, that non-American spelling, the color is no longer a description. It's now a noun. It's the color. The color is a force into itself. It means more than just a spectrum of light reflecting off an object. Now, the color is a malevolence with a will of its own.
Right.
And that's how he draws you to it, is by that clever, I consider a clever use of a different spelling.
Yes. I used to, on my biology test, I'd get in trouble because I would use that spelling just for whatever reason, past life, whatever the heck, I don't know. But I noticed it because I was like, hey, he's writing color the way I write color. Right, cool. But the story, I'm not going to do a reading from that because it's actually... it's a story you should read. Everybody should read The Color Out of Space, because it does speak forward in time to Stephen King. In the books that Stephen King did about aliens falling in, alien craft falling, or meteorites falling in New England. And but the other thing is, I
believe that was the Luck of Geordie Verrill, I believe, was when they did it for TV, it was called the Luck of Geordie Verrill, where he thought he was going to be rich for having a chunk of meteorite, and it didn't end well for him.
It doesn't end well for him. And then in The Color Out of Space, they're actually going to cover up the whole land around where this particular meteorite falls with a reservoir. And there's some movie, and I can't remember it, but it's about a ship that's taking over everything, taking over people and everything else, and there's another alien that's there to protect mankind from this particular happening. He gets to Earth first, and he's sort of born as a little kid with issues and speech impediment, but he's actually an alien who's meant to protect humankind from this approaching spacecraft. Do you remember that movie? Yeah, Dreamcatcher. It's like Dreamcatcher. Yeah. Isn't it? Or is it just me?
No, that's Dreamcatcher. They had Douglas, or they called him Duddits because that's how he could pronounce his name. But yeah, you had a core of friends that were all a little weird. I mean, one could locate lost objects. Another one had an area in his mind that he could hide in. You know, these guys, you get the impression one was a psychic empath. So these guys that hung out together were sort of the oddballs, and I don't think so much that people knew that they had powers. They just knew that they were weird, and they all had compassion for the kid with the speech impediment that, you know, was actually, like you said, he was actually an alien inside that child's body.
Yes.
So they, perforce, they formed their own little clique of oddballs.
Yes, and then they remembered what he had said, and it was a situation where they were witnessing people being taken over by this force, and that had actually was attached to a ship that had come down. So it's very similar in how they. I don't know if the makers of the movie followed Stephen King exactly, but you know, there's a lot of. If you've read a lot of Stephen King, and you read H.P. Lovecraft, you'll see some similarities in the story. And The Color Out of Space, what I find so fantastic about what Lovecraft does is he really gets into the denial that people go through when something weird is happening. It's like they deny that it's happening, and then they deny that it's happening, and then they deny that it's happening, and they keep trying to struggle on in denial. And in The Color Out of Space, the family that is living on the property where the meteorite falls by their well is just in more and more and more denial until they're all basically taken out by the thing. And you know, that's very realistic. That's what happens. It's like, how do you know that's what? Who are you, guy? How do you know this happens? Was this something that they were doing in earlier sci-fi, Eric? Or to me, it's just so realistic. Do you know? Yep, he may be working. Hang on for a minute, guys.
Damn it, I keep forgetting to hit the unmute. No, there's a lot of things. You know, HP wasn't just a copycat. He was also an innovator, and a lot of people kind of forget that. If you talk to talk to Neil Gaiman or Stephen King, Robert Bloch, these people held H.P. Lovecraft up in high regards as an innovator. You know, some of these elements, like the color that is actually an entity that just more or less almost like a fungus. He tries to take an element that you wouldn't think of as having any kind of sentience, and he assigns sentience to it, just to give that foreignness to it, that alienness to it. In his work, you know, in The Color Out of Space, it's not just a spectrum of color, it's an evil will, and it's a spreading sickness. And that's an element that he introduces into fiction, into the horror genre, and into, you know, what would later come from science fiction, would become science fiction. So you've got this man who goes from copying other, you know, British authors to this guy that's introducing elements, new elements into the world of fiction. And that's one of H.P. Lovecraft's legacies. Things like the color, oh Lord, he was an avid amateur astronomer. He was actually, you know, pals with the guy that ran the observatory there in Provence at the university. And he would spend a lot of time at the university's telescope. And this is, you know, if you read some of his early science fiction, I think Polaris is one. the theory of special relativity is probably still in its infancy, being scribbled in Albert Einstein's notebooks. It's not out there yet. People don't know about it. So to read how dated this is by his concept of like, oh, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump to that star, there's no concept of light years. But the stars are in themselves entities. So it's really a kind of a history lesson to go back and read some of his early, what we would call science fiction today, because it is quite dated with what we know about the universe now. We're like, oh, that poor guy, he had no clue.
Well, he didn't have a clue about that, but there are some things that it's like he hints at them, even though it was so long ago. So I have a question for you. What were you going to read tonight? Do you have something that...
Yeah, I've got 3 selections that are, kind of short, and to me they cover some of his personal likes and also show a side that I don't, sort of a world weariness in some that I don't know if it comes out in some of his other works. Would you like me to read the first one?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. I'm going to read tonight. HP he loved cats. And there's many times that cats are a focal point of his work. And tonight, I'm going to read one of his most pro-cat pieces, The Cats of Althar, by H.P. Lovecraft. It is said that in Althar, which lies beyond the river Sky, no man may kill a cat. And this I can verily believe as I gaze upon him who sitteth purring before the fire. For the cat is cryptic, and close to strange things which men cannot see. He is the soul of antique Egyptus, and bearer of tales from forgotten cities in Meray and Ophir. He is kin of the jungle's lords, and the heir to the secrets of hoary and sinister Africa. The Sphinx is his cousin, and he speaks her language, but he is more ancient than the Sphinx, and remembers that which she hath forgotten. In Althar, before ever the burgesses forbade the killing of cats, there dwelt an old cotter and his wife, who delighted to trap and slay cats of their neighbors. Why they did this I know not, save that many hate the voice of the cat in the night, and take it ill that cats should run stealthily about yards and gardens at twilight. But whatever the reason, this old man and his wife took pleasure in trapping and slaying every cat which ever came near their hovel. And from some of the sounds heard after dark, many villagers fancied that the manner of slaying was exceedingly peculiar. But the villagers did not discuss such things with the old man and his wife, because of the habitual expression on the withered faces of the two, and because their cottage was so small, so darkly hidden under spreading oaks at the back of a neglected yard. In truth, much as the owners of cats hated these odd folk, they feared them even more, and instead of berating them as brutal assassins, merely took care that no cherished pet or mouser should stray toward the remote hovel under the dark trees. When through some unavoidable oversight a cat was missed and sounds heard after dark, the loser would lament impotently or console himself by thanking fate that it was not one of his children who had thus vanished. For the people of Althar were simple and knew not whence it is all cats first came. One day a caravan of strange wanderers from the south entered the narrow cobbled streets of Althar. Dark wanderers they were, and unlike the other roving folk who pass through the village twice every year. In the marketplace they told fortunes for silver, and bought gay beads from the merchants. What was the land of these wanderers none could tell, but it was seen that they were given to strange prayers, and that they had painted on the sides of their wagons strange figures with human bodies, the heads of cats, hawks, rams, and lions, and the leader of the caravan wore a headdress with 2 horns and a curious disc betwixt the horns. There was in this singular caravan a little boy with no father or mother, but only a tiny black kitten to cherish. The plague had not been kind to him, yet had left him the small furry thing to mitigate his sorrow. And when one is very young, one can find a great relief in the lively antics of a black kitten. So the boy, whom the dark folk called Menes, smiled more often than he wept, and he sat playing with his graceful kitten on the steps of an oddly painted wagon. On the third morning of the wanderer's stay in Althar, Menes could not find his kitten, and as he sobbed aloud in the marketplace, certain villagers told him of the old man and his wife, and of sounds heard in the night. And when he heard these things, his sobbing gave place to meditation, and finally to prayer. He stretched out his arms toward the sun and prayed in a tongue no villager could understand, though indeed the villagers did not try very hard to understand, since their attention was mostly taken up by the sky and the odd shapes the clouds were assuming. It was very peculiar, but as this little boy uttered his petition, there seemed to form overhead the shadowy, nebulous figures of exotic things, of hybrid creatures crowned with horn-flanked discs. Nature is full of such illusions to impress the imaginative. That night the wanderers left Althar and were never seen again, and the householders were troubled when they noticed that in all the village there was not a cat to be found. From each hearth the familiar cat had vanished, cats large and small, black, gray, striped, yellow, and white. Old Cranon, the burgomaster, swore that the dark folk had taken the cats away in revenge for the killing of Menes' kitten, and cursed the caravan and the little boy. But Nith, the lean notary, declared that the old cotter and his wife were more likely persons to suspect, for their hatred of cats was notorious and increasingly bold. Still, no one durst complain to the sinister couple. Even when little Atal, the innkeeper's son, vowed that he had at twilight seen all the cats of Althar in that accursed yard under the trees, pacing very slowly and solemnly in a circle around the cottage, two abreast, as if in performance of some unheard-of rite of beasts. The villagers did not know how much to believe from so small a boy, and though they feared that the evil pair had charmed the cats to their death, they preferred not to chide the old cotter till they met him outside his dark and repellent yard. So Althar went to sleep in vain anger, and when the people awakened at dawn, behold, every cat was back at his accustomed hearth, large and small, black, gray, striped, yellow, and white. None was missing. Very sleek and fat did the cats appear, and sonorous with purring content. The citizens talked with one another of the affair and marveled not a little. Old Cranon again insisted that it was the dark folk who had taken them, since cats did not return alive from the cottage of the ancient man and his wife. But all agreed on one thing, that the refusal of all the cats to eat their portions of meat or drink, their saucers of milk, was exceedingly curious. And for 2 whole days the sleek, lazy cats of Althar would touch no food, but only doze by the fire or in the sun. It was fully a week before the villagers noticed that no lights were appearing at dusk in the windows of the cottage under the trees. Then the lean Nith remarked that no one had seen the old man or his wife since the night the cats were away. In another week, the burgomaster decided to overcome his fears and call at the strangely silent dwelling as a matter of duty. Though in so doing he was careful to take with him Shang the blacksmith and Tool the cutter of stone as witnesses. And when they had broken down the frail door, they found only this: 2 cleanly picked human skeletons on the earthen floor, and a number of singular beetles crawling in the shadowy corners. There was subsequently much talk among the burgesses of Althar. Zath, the coroner, disputed at length with Nith, the lean notary, and Cranon and Shang and THAL were overwhelmed with questions. Even little Atal, the innkeeper's son, was closely questioned and given a sweetmeat as his reward. They talked of the old cotter and his wife, of the caravan of dark wanderers, of small Menez and his black kitten, of the prayer of Menez and the sky during that prayer, of the doings of the cats on the night the caravan left, and of what was later found in the cottage under the dark trees in the repellent yard. And in the end, the Burgesses passed that remarkable law which is told of by traders in Hatheg and discussed by travelers in Near, namely, that in Althar no man may kill a cat.
Ooh, and I think that's a good thing. Wow. Does BB like that story? Can you read it to BB?
Oh, I'm sure he does.
Yeah, that's a good story.
We had tried to do, we had tried to do MP3s of these, and technical difficulties meant we had to do live. And while I was reading this into the mic, BB was outside the studio door, caterwauling, as only a Siamese can do. And I left it in there because I thought that was the perfect background.
I'd love to hear that. I would love to hear that sometime. Well, we're going to come back after this break with more H.P. Lovecraft. Not H.B., H.P. Since I can't talk, since I've been reading so much today. And if you have any questions for Eric or myself about H.P. Lovecraft, you can type them in the chat rooms. We will answer chat questions later on in the show. Until then, go get some eggnog. Go, do what you're going to do for the break. 7-minute stretch coming up right here.
Hey, space travelers, it's Joe Roop, your host of Spaced Out Saturdays. Come join me as we explore the realms of the paranormal, the esoteric, and everything in between every Saturday night at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern. You know the truth is out there. Don't get caught sleepwalking. Come join Spaced Out Saturdays. That's every Saturday night, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, right here on SpacedOutRadio.com.
365 days a year, we're in the field, investigating UFO sightings, talking to alien abductees, and visiting secret military locations like Area 51. We're UFO Seekers, official partner of Spaced Out Radio. Follow our daily search for the truth at ufoseekers.com or like us on social media. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
From coast to coast to coast, Blacklight Uncharted is taking on the paranormal across Canada. From ghostly hauntings to the UFOs flying above in conjunction with MUFON Canada, we're closely investigating what's going on in the northern skies and checking out the apparitions that walk among us. Check out our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com. We want to know your thoughts, we want to hear your experiences, and we want you to share your stories. The answers are out there, and we intend to find them.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At SpaceOutRadio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to SpaceOutRadio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Want to learn more about aliens, cover-ups, conspiracies, cryptids, and the paranormal? All you have to do is tune in S4 as we take over Spaced Out Radio Night, starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, each and every Saturday night, right after Spaced Out Saturdays. Hi there, this is Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. Join me, Corey Ruiz, and friends as we discuss the hot topics of the night. It's fun, entertaining, and as dark as the night. Find us at spacedoutradio.com.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
There's a lot of strange going on in this world, and we can help you find out what's going on with you. Paranormal, cryptids, UFOs in the sky, aliens in your bedroom tickling your toes. We have the investigators you need to find out the answers you deserve. All you have to do is head to spacedoutradio.com. Your information is 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines Report. It's free, and we're here to help.
Do you want to know what's really going on in your world? Do you have questions about who you can trust in the mainstream media? Then look no further than the Rebel Planet. Come get the straight answers right here at spacedoutradio.com. Join me, Jamie Sexton, creator of Rebel Planet News, as I fill you in on the stories behind the stories. All you truth seekers, be sure to tune in to Rebel Planet on spacedoutradio.com the third Thursday of every month.
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from your 4-Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
Looking for nighttime adventure? Old school radio that delves into everything out of the norm? Then check us out at Spaced Out Radio. This is Dave Scott. Every Monday through Friday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, we're going to take you on a wild ride ranging from conspiracies to true crime and every ghost, alien, and Sasquatch story in between. We're always live, and we're always interactive with you. So join us at spacedoutradio.com, where together, we own the night.
We're back with Cosmic Passport on Spaced Out Radio. This is your host, Elizabeth Anglin. I'm coming to you live from the desert southwest of Madrid, New Mexico, our little hippie art colony town here, where we have had the Christmas spirit all week. And Wyatt has had a little bit too much Christmas spirit. I think I'm going to write a horror story called The Dogs of Madrid. Woo! Baby, it's getting rich in here and right. Well, before we go more into H.P. Lovecraft, we are wanting to thank all of you listening in from around North America and the world, and welcome everyone listening on WQEE 99 Rock, the Key in Noonan, Georgia, at spacedoutradio.com on Spreaker, on the United Public Radio Network, Renegade Talk Radio, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and on the Fringe.fm. We also want to thank our guitar god, Bumblefoot, who creates the music that we have here that helps us rock out the week and the weekend, the official spacedoutradio.com music. If you are on Twitter, check us out at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like at Spaced Out Radio Show. On Facebook, you can follow me at Cosmic Passport with Elizabeth Anglin. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download our shows from iTunes. And we are also on RadioGuide.fm, TalkStream Live, and on Stitcher. And of course, our website is spacedoutradio.com. If you go to patreon.com, we have some cool offers for you, our listeners, there as well. Hey, check those out. Also, we do have a GoFundMe going on right now. Check out the Spaced Out Radio GoFundMe. We are looking for new equipment, and you can help us out in the spirit of giving if you have a chance. We've got some fun things that you can do when you give, like, give $100, be on our round table. Talk with me, yell at me. Hey, I know some people, Joe Monk, who might want to do that. If you head to our website at spacedoutradio.com, for just $5 a month, you can become an SOR space traveler, and we offer some pretty decent stuff. Not getting on the round table, but, some pretty decent stuff for you, our valued listener, there as well. Check out our new section, The Encounter, that deals with everything paranormal, courtesy of Eric Markham, who's on with me tonight, and you can check out Dave Scott's latest blog there as well. And if you've had an experience you can't explain, fill out an SOR Sightlines report. Our researchers are ready to help you find out what's going on. And again, we thank everybody who's listening from WQEE 99 Rock the Key, the Spaced Out Radio family, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, United Public Radio 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and listeners from over 160 countries around the world. Thank you for listening to us. Tomorrow is going to be a Spaced Out Radio replay-a-thon. It is Christmas Day. What are y'all doing? Share in the chat room. I'm going to be looking in after I get done reading my favorite story, which is the story of my life, The Outsider. Yeah, The Outsider. That's what I consider myself. And I think it's relatively true, because when you got a scary life, and you want to tell somebody about it, they get scared, and then you're an outsider. But then also just being female, and I think the other female listeners can attest to that, I think we all feel like outsiders from time to time, especially when it comes to things like going to the school dance or a party or something like this. And this story just perfectly puts together, for me, a lot of what the horror of being an outsider means. So, this was written in 1921, and it begins with a poem by Keats. The night the Baron dreamt of many a woe, and all his warrior guest with shade and form of witch and demon and large coffin worm were long benightmared. And that's the preface for it. Unhappy is he to whom the memories of childhood bring only fear and sadness. Wretched is he who looks back upon lone hours in vast and dismal chambers with brown hangings and maddening rows of antique books, or upon odd watches in twilight groves of grotesque, gigantic, and vine-encumbered trees that silently wave twisted branches far aloft. Such a lot the gods gave to me, the dazed, the disappointed, the barren, the broken, and yet I am strangely content and cling desperately to these sere memories when my mind momentarily threatens to reach beyond, to the other. I know not where I was born, save that the castle was infinitely old and infinitely horrible, full of dark passages and having high ceilings where the eye could find only cobwebs and shadows. The stones in the crumbling corridors seemed always hideously damp, and there was an accursed smell everywhere, as of the piled-up corpses of dead generations. It was never light, so that I used sometimes to light candles and gaze steadily at them for relief. Nor was there any sun outdoors, since the terrible trees grew high above the topmost accessible tower. There was one black tower which reached above the trees into the unknown outer sky, but that was partly ruined and could not be ascended save by a well-nigh impossible climb up the sheer wall, stone by stone. I must have lived years in this place, but I cannot measure the time. Beings must have cared for my needs, yet I cannot recall any person except myself or anything alive but the noiseless rats and bats and spiders. I think that whoever nursed me must have been shockingly aged, since my first conception of a living person was that of something mockingly like myself, yet distorted, shriveled, and decaying like the castle. To me, there was nothing grotesque in the bones and skeletons that strode some of the stone crypts deep down among the foundations. I fantastically associated these things with everyday events, and thought them more natural than the colored pictures of living beings which I found in many of the moldy books. From such books I learned all that I know. No teacher urged or guided me, and I do not recall hearing any human voice in all those years, not even my own, for although I had read of speech, I had never thought to try to speak aloud. My aspect was a matter equally unthought of, for there were no mirrors in the castle, and I merely regarded myself by instinct, as akin to the youthful figures I saw drawn and painted in the books. I felt conscious of youth because I remembered so little. Outside, across the putrid moat and under the dark mute trees, I would often lie and dream for hours about what I read in the books, and would longingly picture myself amidst gay crowds in the sunny world beyond the endless forest. Once I tried to escape from the forest, but as I went farther from the castle, the shade grew denser and the air more filled with brooding fear, so that I ran frantically back, lest I lose my way in a labyrinth of nighted silence. So, through endless twilights, I dreamed and waited, though I knew not what I waited for. Then, in the shadowy solitude, my longing for light grew so frantic that I could rest no more, and I lifted entreating hands to the single black-ruined tower that reached above the forest into the unknown outer sky, and at last I resolved to scale that tower, fall though I might, since it were better to glimpse the sky and perish than live without ever beholding day. In the dank twilight, I climbed the worn and aged stone stairs till I reached the level where they ceased, and thereafter clung perilously to small footholds leading upward. Ghastly and terrible was that dead, stairless cylinder of rock, black, ruined, and deserted and sinister, with startled bats whose wings made no noise. But more ghastly and terrible still was the slowness of my progress, for as I climbed, and climb as I might, the darkness overhead grew no thinner, and a new chill as of haunted and venerable mold assailed me. I shivered as I wondered why I did not reach the light, and would have looked down had I dared. I fancied that night had come suddenly upon me, and vainly groped with one free hand for a window embrasure, that I might peer out and above, and try to judge the height I had attained. All at once, after an infinity of awesome, sightless crawling up that concave and desperate precipice, I felt my head touch a solid thing, and I knew I must have gained the roof, or at least some kind of floor. In the darkness I raised my free hand and tested the barrier, finding it stone and immovable. Then came a deadly circuit of the tower, clinging to whatever holds the slimy wall could give, till finally my testing hand found the barrier yielding, and I turned upward again, pushing the slab or door with my head as I used both hands in my fearful ascent. There was no light revealed above, and as my hands went higher, I knew that my climb was for the nonce ended, since the slab was the trap door of an aperture leading to a level stone surface of greater circumference than the lower tower, no doubt the floor of some lofty and capacious observation chamber. I crawled through carefully and tried to prevent the heavy slab from falling back into place, but failed in the latter attempt. As I lay exhausted on the stone floor, I heard the eerie echoes of its fall, but hoped when necessary to pry it open again. Believing I was now at a prodigious height, far above the accursed branches of the wood, I dragged myself up from the floor and fumbled about for windows, that I might look for the first time upon the sky, and the moon, and the stars of which I had read. But on every hand I was disappointed, since all that I found were vast shelves of marble bearing odious oblong boxes of disturbing size. More and more I reflected and wondered what hoary secrets might abide in this high apartment so many aeons cut off from the castle below. Then unexpectedly my hands came upon a doorway, where hung a portal of stone, rough with strange chiseling. Trying it, I found it locked. But with a supreme burst of strength, I overcame all obstacles and dragged it open inward. As I did so, there came to me the purest ecstasy I have ever known. For shining tranquilly through an ornate grating of iron and down a short stone passageway of steps that ascended from the newly found doorway was the radiant full moon, which I had never before seen save in dreams and in vague visions I dared not call memories. Fancying now that I had attained the very pinnacle of the castle, I commenced to rush up the few steps beyond the door, but the sudden veiling of the moon by a cloud caused me to stumble, and I felt my way more slowly in the dark. It was still very dark when I reached the grating, which I tried carefully and found unlocked, but which I did not open for fear of falling from the amazing height to which I had climbed. Then the moon came out. Most demoniacal of all shocks is that of the abysmally unexpected and grotesquely unbelievable. Nothing I had before undergone could compare in terror with what I now saw, with the bizarre marvels that sight implied. The sight itself was as simple as it was stupefying, for it was merely this. Instead of a dizzying prospect of treetops seen from a lofty eminence, there stretched around me on a level through the grating nothing less than the solid ground, decked and diversified by marble slabs and columns, and overshadowed by an ancient stone church, whose ruined spire gleamed spectrally in the moonlight. Half unconscious, I opened the grating and staggered out upon the white gravel path that stretched away in two directions. My mind, stunned and chaotic as it was, still held the frantic craving for light, and not even the fantastic wonder which had happened could stay my course. I neither knew nor cared whether my experience was insanity, dreaming, or magic, but was determined to gaze on brilliance and gaiety at any cost. I knew not who I was, or what my surroundings might be, though as I continued to stumble along, I became conscious of a kind of fearsome latent memory that made my progress not wholly fortuitous. I passed under an arch out of the region of slabs and columns, and wandered through the open country, sometimes following the visible road, but sometimes leaving it curiously to tread across meadows where only occasional ruins bespoke the ancient presence of a forgotten road. Once I swam across a swift river, where crumbling mossy masonry told of a bridge long vanished. Over 2 hours must have passed before I reached what seemed to be my goal, a venerable ivied castle in a thickly wooded park, maddeningly familiar, yet full of perplexing strangeness to me. I saw that the moat was filled in, and that some of the well-known towers were demolished, whilst new wings existed to confuse the beholder. But what I observed with chief interest and delight were the open windows, gorgeously ablaze with light, and sending forth sound of the gayest revelry. Advancing to one of these, I looked in and saw an oddly dressed company indeed, making merry and speaking brightly to one another. I had never seemingly heard human speech before, and could guess only vaguely what was said. Some of the faces seemed to hold expressions that brought up incredibly remote recollections. Others were utterly alien. Now I stepped through the low window into the brilliantly lighted room, stepping as I did so from my single bright moment of hope to my blackest convulsion of despair and realization. The nightmare was quick to come, for as I entered, there occurred immediately one of the most terrifying demonstrations I had ever conceived. Scarcely had I crossed the sill when there descended upon the whole company a sudden and unheralded fear of hideous intensity, distorting every face and evoking the most horrible screams from nearly every throat. flight was universal, and in the clamor and panic several fell in a swoon and were dragged away by their madly fleeing companions. Many covered their eyes with their hands and plunged blindly and awkwardly in their race to escape, overturning furniture and stumbling against the walls before they managed to reach one of the many doors. The cries were shocking, and as I stood in the brilliant apartment alone and dazed, listening to their vanishing echoes, I trembled at the thought of what might be lurking near me unseen. At a casual inspection, the room seemed deserted. But when I moved toward one of the alcoves, I thought I detected a presence there, a hint of motion beyond the golden arched doorway leading to another and somewhat similar looking room. As I approached the arch, I began to perceive the presence more clearly, and then the first and last sound I ever uttered, a ghastly ululation that revolted me almost as poignantly as its noxious cause, I beheld in full, frightful vividness the inconceivable, indescribable, and unmentionable monstrosity which had by its simple appearance changed a merry company to a herd of delirious fugitives. I cannot even hint what it was like, for it was a compound of all that is unclean, uncanny, unwelcome, abnormal, and detestable. It was the ghoulish shade of decay, antiquity, and desolation, the putrid, dripping eidolon of unwholesome revelation, the awful bearing of that which the merciful earth should always hide. God knows it was not of this world, nor no longer of this world, yet to my horror I saw in its eaten away and bone-revealing outlines a leering, abhorrent travesty on the human shape, and in its moldy, disintegrating apparel, an unspeakable quality that chilled me even more. I was almost paralyzed, but not too much so to make a feeble effort toward flight, a backward stumble which failed to break the spell in which the nameless, voiceless monster held me. My eyes, bewitched by the glassy orbs which stared loathsomely into them, refused to close, though they were mercifully blurred, and showed the terrible object but indistinctly after the first shock. I tried to raise my hand to shut out the sight, yet so stunned were my nerves that my arm could not fully obey my will. The attempt, however, was enough to disturb my balance, so that I had to stagger forward several steps to avoid falling. As I did so, I became suddenly and agonizingly aware of the nearness of the carrion thing, whose hideous, hollow breathing I half fancied I could hear. Nearly mad, I found myself yet able to throw out a hand to ward off the fetid apparition which pressed so close, when in one cataclysmic second of cosmic nightmarishness and hellish accidents, my fingers touched the rotting, outstretched paw of the monster beneath the golden arch. I did not shriek, but all the fiendish ghouls that ride the night wind shrieked for me, as in the same second there crashed down upon my mind a single and fleeting avalanche of soul-annihilating memory. I knew in that second all that had been. I remembered beyond the frightful castle in the trees, and recognized the altered edifice in which I now stood. I recognized, most terrible of all, the unholy abomination that stood leering before me, as I withdrew my sullied fingers from its own. But in the cosmos, there is balm as well as bitterness, and that balm is nepenthe. In the supreme horror of that second, I forgot what had horrified me, and the burst of black memory vanished in a chaos of echoing images. In a dream, I fled from that haunted and accursed pile and ran swiftly and silently in the moonlight. When I returned to the churchyard place of marble and went down the steps, I found the stone trap door immovable. But I was not sorry, for I had hated the antique castle and the trees. Now I ride with the mocking and friendly ghouls on the night wind, and play by day amongst the catacombs of Nephron-Ka in the sealed and unknown valley of Hadath by the Nile. I know that light is not for me, save that of the moon over the rock tombs of Neb, nor any gaiety, save the unnamed feast of Nitocris beneath the Great Pyramid. Yet In my new wildness and freedom, I almost welcome the bitterness of alienage. For although Nepenthe has calmed me, I know always that I am an outsider, a stranger in this century and among those who are still men. This I have known ever since I stretched out my fingers to the abomination within the great gilded frame, stretched out my fingers and touched a cold and unyielding surface of polished glass. And that's what it's like to be an outsider. Hey, how you doing, Eric?
Doing fine.
How's it going over there?
Well, we lab people tend to be a little bit, shall I say, superstitious when things are going well, so I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, cool. So that was The Outsider, which I read live. I guess HP was an outsider because he really knew what it was like. And, you kind of feel like, no matter what you do, even if you show up at the party, people may just run away screaming. At least I always did. Maybe they still do. They just don't tell me they do. You got another one to read for us, Eric?
Yeah, if you're done picking that one. On the one hand, with that story, he goes out of his way to explain, in the early part of it, how the protagonist doesn't know their appearance.
Right.
There's no, I had no, however, if you're sitting, if you're sitting here at your chair, you know what your hands, your arms, and stuff like that look at. So it's kind of clever that he misdirects you. He puts that in your head that, okay, this creature doesn't know what it looks like until it sees the mirror.
Right.
All the time, it's like, when your logical mind kicks in, it's like, oh, wait a minute. Bull crap. It's like,
right.
But to make it work, that's one of the things, that's sort of the genius of H.P. Lovecraft, is he knew how to put little, distractions in there so you don't catch the inaccuracy until, long time after. It's like, oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute.
But I also think that has something to do with his genius of really understanding denial. Like, you can look at yourself and think, oh, wow, I'm just like, every 20-year-old or something, and then you realize, oh, well, no, that's not true.
Right.
But if you want to be in denial, you can be, and denial can be a very powerful force in the human mind. That is sort of a survival mechanism, and people who grieve are, there's the famous saying about DABDA: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. But it all starts with denial. It's like, oh. Right. So to me, that also gets back to the denial of that he speaks to in other stories. When I first read this story, I really saw the being as female, and so I read this at a party in 1997, and I read it like as a silly girl. But now, later on, it kind of doesn't matter. It's never said whether the character is male or female, but it can come across either way, because he also doesn't really give the character a gender, which is kind of fascinating for the time, right?
Well, it gives you, here's another, whether it was deliberate on his part or a happy accident, you get to read that character with the voice you choose. It works equally well, young man, young woman, either way, it works. It's so open-ended.
Right.
One of the things that they don't realize, about a lot of people don't realize, is he he edited and ghostwrote and rewrote a lot of successful authors' works. He was a hell of an editor, so he had picked up some things here and there, and little tricks of the trade. And the ambiguous way he leaves the sex of the reader open.
Right.
So that whoever's reading it can put whichever, you can assign whatever your brain assigns to that. It works.
Yeah, you can identify with that character. Everybody can identify with that character if they want to or if they do, and it doesn't matter if you're male, if you're female. And he does that a lot. He leaves it open a lot if it's a first person story. He lets the details tell the story rather than the character. In this, it's all about what's around this character. They're not really looking at the character. Doesn't see themselves, but they see everything else that's around from. And that really tells the story. And that's also fascinating when somebody can do that as a writer, telling the story by what's around. He's amazing. So let's hear more. What have you got for us? What else are you going to do?
Oh, okay. This one is a story he wrote that sort of, you take a common everyday vista and you light it with a different source and it becomes something else entirely. What I have here is called What the Moon Brings by H.P. Lovecraft. I hate the moon. I'm afraid of it. For when it shines on certain scenes familiar and loved, it sometimes makes them unfamiliar and hideous. It was in the spectral summer when the moon shone down on the old garden where I wandered, the spectral summer of narcotic flowers and humid seas, of foliage that bring wild and many-colored dreams. And as I walked by the shallow crystal stream, I saw unwanted ripples tipped with yellow light, as if those placid waters were drawn on in restless currents to strange oceans that are not in this world. Silent and sparkling, bright and baleful, those moon-cursed waters hurried I knew not whither, whilst from the embowered banks white lotus blossoms fluttered one by one in the opiate night wind and dropped despairingly into the stream, swirling away horribly under the arched carven bridge and staring back with sinister resignation of calm, dead faces. And as I ran along the shore, crushing sleeping flowers with heedless feet, and maddened ever by the fear of unknown things and the lure of the dead faces, I saw that the garden had no end under that moon. For where by day the walls were, there stretched now only new vistas of trees and paths, flowers and shrubs, stone idols and pagodas, and bendings of the yellow-litten stream past grassy banks and under grotesque bridges of marble. And the lips of the dead lotus faces whispered sadly and bade me follow. Nor did I cease my steps till the stream became a river and joined amidst marshes of swaying reeds and beaches of gleaming sand the shore of a vast and nameless sea. Upon that sea the hateful moon shone, and over its unvocal waves weird perfumes brooded. And as I saw therein the lotus faces vanish, I longed for nets that I might capture them and learn from them the secrets which the moon had brought upon the night. But when the moon went over to the west and the still tide ebbed from the sullen shore, I saw in that light old spires that the waves almost uncovered, and white columns gay with festoons of green seaweed. And knowing that to this sunken place all the dead had come, I trembled and did not wish again to speak with the lotus faces. Yet when I saw far out in the sea a black condor descend from the sky to seek rest on a vast reef, I would fain have questioned him and asked him of those whom I had known when they were alive. This I would have asked him had he not been so far away, but he was very, very far and could not be seen at all when he drew nigh the gigantic reef. So I watched the tide go out under the sinking moon and saw gleaming the spires, the towers, and the roofs of that dead, dripping city. And as I watched, my nostrils tried to close against the perfume-conquering stench of the world's dead. For truly in this unplaced and forgotten spot had all the flesh of the churchyards gathered for puffy sea worms to gnaw and glut upon. Over those horrors the evil moon now hung very low, but puffy worms of the sea need no moon to feed by, and as I watched the ripples that told of the writhing of the worms beneath, I felt a new chill from afar out whither the condor had flown, as if my flesh had caught a horror before my eyes had seen it. Nor had my flesh trembled without cause, for when I raised my eyes I saw that the waters had ebbed very low, shewing much of the vast reef whose rim I had seen before, and when I saw that this reef was but the black basalt crown of a shocking icon whose monstrous forehead now shone in the dim moonlight, and whose vile hooves must paw the hellish ooze miles below, I shrieked and shrieked, lest the hidden face rise above the waters, and lest the hidden eyes look at me after the slinking away of that leering and treacherous yellow moon. And to escape this relentless thing, I plunged gladly and unhesitatingly into the stinking shallows, where amidst weedy walls and sunken streets, fat sea worms feast upon the world's dead. The end.
So, okay, dumb me, was that the head of Cthulhu, or what was that?
Probably not.
Okay.
That was written early in that. No, that was probably because his description of Cthulhu is almost always an octopus, an octopus face, It was something as old and probably as evil, or I think that was written before Cthulhu had really come. It might be a precursor. When you consider the hooves.
Yeah, Cthulhu didn't have
the fact that he
hooves.
says hooves, right, that's more the devil or, some guardian of the dead, what's the angel of death, Azrael. It's a personification of some, gatherer of the dead.
Yeah. So pre-Cthulhu, but still very, very frightening. And that was so frightening a short story that when I got to that part, I stopped reading it. For some reason, that just really scared me. But, perhaps that's a primal thing for human beings, that, things under the water, like Jaws and things you're not really sure where they begin and where they end. Wow. Very, very scary.
It really is. It has a dreamlike quality because it really is based on a dream he had. This guy lived in a very dark place. So it's not, it's not a wonder that his dreams didn't become dark as well. And this whole dreamy atmosphere was not by accident.
Yeah. Perhaps if he had a happier life, he'd be writing tales of pretty octopi in shallows with sunlight glinting off of them, but no, he didn't have a happier life. What's interesting as I read about his life is that no matter what he did, it seemed like it was doomed. Did you notice that?
Yes, he's living as a doted upon grandchild. Well, now Grandpa's gone. He starts to come on to his own a little bit, editing and writing that, and then that kind of just drops off. He marries, and the woman loved him and actually could have, he would not have died in poverty if he had stayed married to her. But his two dowager aunts, who are probably the foulest, bitterest people to ever raise a child wouldn't hear of a Lovecraft or a Phillips being, supported by his wife. That was just, that couldn't happen. And she actually, volunteered to come to Providence because H.P. was very well, he was very driven or, held almost captive prisoner by Providence, Rhode Island. That's, his life was there and everything, was so tied up in that. And, Sonia Green was like, well, hell, I can have a milliner shop anywhere. I will come to Providence, open up a millinery shop. You can go on with your writing, and no, can't do that. Couldn't, there was this genteel poverty and this image that, as one of the old families, Howard was supposed to fit into. So she finally, when his wife, Sonia Green, ended up going out west, and she even supported him for a while. But when he refused to come to her, finally, it was like, screw this, bye. It was over. So, he there's this gawpy, bookish, nerdish man who finds a woman to fall in love with him. That fails. So it's like any time, you're right, any time he would seem to be on the right track, something would conspire to ruin it, whether it was himself or things external.
I mean, even one of his patrons was Harry Houdini, and Houdini was trying to help him, become more famous, make more money, and then he died. It's like, no, he just couldn't catch a break, and he didn't want to become the editor of, what was it, Strange Tales? You know what it was. Major Weird Tales.
Well, the editor of Weird Tales is who published a lot of his stuff. Was it August Derleth? Names, unless I have a source in front of me, names get scrambled. But, after his death, even, there were hangers-on, wannabe authors who were putting stuff out as, well, this is something Howard and I worked on while he was alive. I think that was August Derleth. There were two wills, and one person thought he had control of HP's papers, and another person thought they had, and it got nasty. For somebody who wasn't worth two brass nickels when he was alive, once he was dead, it was game on.
Yeah, and well, what's interesting about that is that, he gets married to Sonia Green. She loses her business and her assets disappear in a bank failure. But then he gets offered a job at Weird Tales as the editor and refuses because he doesn't want to move to Chicago. And in this, someone he's criticized becomes the editor and refuses his submissions while he's alive. But as soon as he dies, he starts putting in his work in Weird Tales. So, it's like, no matter what he does, he could have had that money when he was alive, but the editor wouldn't publish it. So he waits till he's dead and then publishes it. It's almost as if the whole world conspired to just be a bastard to the man, or... Well,
there's that, but in many ways, H.P. Lovecraft is his own worst enemy. Okay. He was, he saw himself as sort of this suffering, sort of the pauper suffering artist, and you'd be offered editing jobs, even locally, and he just, he couldn't be stressed like that. He would come up with excuses. Oh, my constitution is such that I can. Yeah, he was sort of a wuss in his own right. He made mistakes, and he had he had an image he was trying to live to that didn't help him in any way. I think the modern phrase would be he was cut out to be rich, but he was sewed together wrong.
Right. Okay. So, I was reading a book, and I don't know what you think of. I was reading the story, The Picture in the House, because it was...
Love it.
Okay, a really great ending, and I almost used that, but there was some words and some racial stuff in that, and he's talking about niggers and Negroes, and in this book, the picture in the book in the house, these Africans don't look African, they look Caucasian, they look white. I'm not going to spoil the story. I think you should get H.P. Lovecraft. It's actually very cheap to get on Kindle right now, and read it. But I did notice that, and I thought, well, if I read that, what will people think of me? But was there something in him? Did he, was there a racial resentment?
Well, he was raised that way. And he would spout crap like that. If ever you ever needed in his story an underhanded, mongrel Igor type, lab assistant or doer of dirty deeds for a master, he used the surname Gomes, which is a very common Portuguese name in that area. I'm related to the Gomeses, and through marriage, and he would take names, and there was racism was a different thing. I'm not saying it was a better class of racism or anything like that, but so many people were that being unracist was the standout. Now, if you wrote or you spoke like they did back then, all of society would pretty much be, we see it every day in social media. Somebody says the wrong thing. Next thing you know, they're living on the street with critique your book for food sign around their neck. It's a completely different era. Now, as far as the racism go, he was a xenophobe. One of the things that drove him crazy when he lived with Sonia in New York was all the immigrants. He just felt like he was bathing in a cesspool, and he was anti-Semitic, which supposedly Sonia Green was a Jew. His own wife was a Jew. So you get this dichotomy with H.P. Lovecraft in that he seems to be openly racist, but then he forms friendships with the very people that he's supposed to be racist against. So it's really, you got to wonder how much of that was just a reflex, because that's how his aunts, and his aunts were the strong-willed kind of women that, ruled with an iron fist. And there was no silk glove. It was just purely an iron fist. So how much of that was drilled into him by a couple of spinster aunts that were total buttholes, and how much of that was his inner voice? In a lot of ways, I think some of that was he said it because that's what he was expected to say. But when it came to one-on-one dealings with people, he didn't seem to be a racist at all. He was xenophobic of a crowd, but of the individual, he would not have that guard up.
Well, and it also, some of his stories do, the way they're written can speak to the racism, but then the way they're written can speak to not. He's, in some of these tales, he's writing about the extreme other. You'll know what I've forgotten what the actual title of this is, but the Henry Akeley Whitmarsh saga with the fungoids that
Mhm.
land and take over Henry Akeley and, put the mind in the cylinder, or however that goes. I mean, those are
Right.
those are extreme other beings. And he writes about the fear of Henry Akeley, who, he's shooting at them. He's doing everything he can to keep them out and away, and he buys dogs, he buys guns, and he shoots at these buzzing fungoid beings that are conglomerates, and then finally he allows them in and is convinced to go to their planet, the 9th planet, with them. And in so doing, he basically loses himself, his physical body as he knew it is put in canisters and cylinders.
Yeah, he's just an intellect, more or less a disembodied intellect.
He's a disembodied intellect. But yet it goes through this whole, denial of, oh, yeah, okay, I'm doing all right, but this has happened, the horses are running away, the dogs are going crazy, oh, and now this has happened, and now this has happened, and now this has happened. And then by the end of it, he's, to me as an abductee, this speaks to me because it's like, oh, so now that you're working with the aliens, you're having some weird form of what's the syndrome called? Where Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, he's got Stockholm syndrome.
Right. And the question is, does Akeley have Stockholm syndrome, or does he just all of a sudden become curious and want to find out about the universe and want to learn from these beings? So, perhaps this
and keep in mind, think of reading that book, think of reading that story in the context of that era, where you wouldn't have the knowledge of space travel, the knowledge of the solar system we do now, where probably everybody based their idea of the cosmos on H.G. Wells or something.
Yeah.
So you read that story in that context, and it becomes even more alien and unknown.
Yes, because these are aliens who have wings that can withstand space. They can fly through space, and yeah, and you wonder, oh, how does that work? Well, from our perspective, those aliens later they sort of evolve, and in some of his later works, you have these creatures called the Great Old Ones, which are essentially a mobile, sentient vegetable. I mean, that's how far he goes to make these things foreign. Yes, they had tentacles. Yes, they had language, and they spoke in a piping, keening language, and everything. Their architecture is based on fives because they're like cucumbers with fiber. The whole idea of finding just how. It's almost like he was saying, okay, how far out can I take this? And you end up with the Great Old Ones, which are they're kind of a fungal, animal, vegetable matter conglomeration. Something so foreign that your brain just, when you read it, it's like, huh? Cucumbers can't walk. Yeah, the walking cucumbers. Oh, but still, it's, if you've been confronted by the other or by something that is not normal, it's oddly the same, even though it's not fungoid. It's oddly the same. It could be. And the things people say about it, oh, it's nanobots, oh, it's this, oh, it's that. It's oddly the same what people come up with. All right, well, we are getting close to our next break, and we have some more stories coming in for you after the break. I'm getting ready for the break a little bit early here. I know it's odd to be talking about Lovecraft on Christmas, and perhaps we should be talking about Santa Claus. But, you take your comfort where you can get it. And people who have had very difficult experiences, it really is comforting to read about scary things that are scarier than the things that you've gone through. There is a story that's related about Lovecraft. Where he was told that Santa Claus didn't exist, and then he asked, well, God is not equally a myth? And so he was a deep thinker. He was a reader at the age of 3, and he started reading about the Roman pantheon of gods, and he also saw them as genuine expressions of divinity. And he did have a Christian upbringing, and but he had a family that wanted him to think, but he didn't really get educated. But it's interesting that because he wasn't educated, he was so often thinking outside the box. And so Eric and I tonight, we're thinking outside the box by talking about H.P. Lovecraft, who we think is a gift. And we're going to keep doing that in the next hour. And we'll be back in the next hour with more. But until then, we have another break coming up. So stay tuned. We'll be back with more scary stuff with Eric and Elizabeth. Not getting nerdy, but getting spooky. See you soon.
Hi there, this is Dave Scott from Spaced Out Radio, and I want you to come on a nightly journey. Starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, every Monday through Friday, you can come hang out with me and the other space travelers. We have it all from Carl the Alien bouncing on by to those misfit gnomes causing havoc. It's 3 hours of fun and entertainment on those topics the mainstream really doesn't want to touch. Come get all paranormal with us at spacedoutradio.com, and together, my friends, along with our resident guitar god Bumblefoot, we own the night.
There's stories, then there's the truth. Do any of us really trust the news anymore? This is Jamie Sexton, owner of Rebel Planet News. The third Thursday of every month, I appear on spacedoutradio.com to bring you the truth you deserve, without mainstream media lies or alternative media fear-mongering. We'll get to the heart of the story and deliver the truth you're seeking. So come join us here for the Rebel Planet at spacedoutradio.com.
Not ready for bed on Saturday night? Right after Spaced Out Saturdays, hop on over to S4 with Corey Ruiz and me, Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. With S4, there are no limits to what we try and uncover. From government conspiracies to helping clean up the paranormal, no topic is safe on S4. We get to the heart of the matter, of the subjects you want to learn more about. So tune in on S4 starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, only on spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4 Cop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for the Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories, from alien encounters to the latest conspiracies. You won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter Online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Do you want to know the truth? Do UFOs exist? Are aliens real? Are the governments hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO seekers, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow along with us as we journey across the United States, visiting UFO hotspots and alien hotspots, trying to document the UFO phenomenon. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
There's a lot of strange going on in this world, and we can help you find out what's going on with you. Paranormal, cryptids, UFOs in the sky, aliens in your bedroom tickling your toes. We have the investigators you need to find out the answers you deserve. All you have to do is head to spacedoutradio.com. Your information is 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines Report. It's free, and we're here to help.
Patrolling the Pacific Northwest, we are always on the lookout for the strange and unassuming stories that real people are experiencing. Hi, I'm Vincent Zunza from Pacific North Weird. Me and Alexandra Sullivan have teamed to bring to you those odd stories that never seem to make it into the mainstream. Stories so weird that will leave you scratching your head wondering, is this real? It's as real as it gets with Pacific North Weird. You can watch our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
We're lighting the void on Saturday nights on Spaced Out Radio. Hey, this is Joe Roop, and I'm hanging out in SOR headquarters every Saturday night, bringing you the latest news when it comes to the weird and strange. Bigfoot, occult, UFOs, ghosts, and everything in between, I got you covered. You can tune in to spacedoutradio.com starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. Come travel into the void with us on Spaced Out Saturdays.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guests and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Now, back to Elizabeth Anglin and SOR.
Hey y'all, this is Elizabeth Anglin. I'm back. We are here with Cosmic Passport on Spaced Out Radio. Thank you so much for listening. I'm coming to you live from the wonderful desert southwest of Madrid, New Mexico, where we have so many Christmas lights up. I'm going to post a picture tomorrow night. I'm sure they'll still be up tomorrow night. We are talking tonight about H.P. Lovecraft because to me he's a gift, and he's done some awesome writing and some stuff about being otherly, outsiderish, scary. Things that are scary, things that go bump in the night, and also what the human mind does when it's confronted by scary stuff. And the human mind does some really interesting things. Before we talk more about that, I want to thank everyone listening in from around North America and the world. Everyone listening on WQEE 99 Rock the Key in Noonan, Georgia. At spacedoutradio.com, on Spreaker, on the United Public Radio Network, Renegade Talk Radio, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and on thefringe.fm. We also want to thank our guitar god, Ron Bumblefoot THAL, formerly of Guns N' Roses, currently of Art of Anarchy, for creating the music that makes Spaced Out Radio rock, the official spacedoutradio.com music. Also, you can check us out on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like at Spaced Out Radio Show. On Facebook, you can follow me at Cosmic Passport with Elizabeth Anglin. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download our shows from iTunes. We're also on RadioGuide.fm, TalkStream Live, and on Stitcher. And of course, our website is spacedoutradio.com. And if you go to patreon.com, we have some cool offers for you, our listeners, there as well. Make sure you check those out. If you want to take part in the show, you'll have to sign into one of our chat rooms on Spreaker or on the chat room on Facebook on the SOR Space Travelers Club. And if you head to our website, spacedoutradio.com, for just $5 a month, you can become an SOR Space Traveler. We offer some pretty decent stuff for you, our valued listener, and it's our opportunity to give back to you. Please check out our news section, The Encounter, that deals with everything paranormal, courtesy of our editors, Eric Markham, or our editor, Eric Markham, and you can check out Dave Scott's latest blog there as well. Well, we thank you for listening on this Christmas Eve. We are maybe waiting for Santa Claus and maybe some reindeer who we won't talk about the scientificness about why reindeer lose their horns. No, we're not going to say anything like that. But we do want to thank you for listening. Hey, the rest of the week, tomorrow night, we will have an SOR Spaced Out Radio replay night. And then Dave Scott will be back later in the week. And on Saturday, Joe Roop will be in. And on Sunday, I'll be back with Paul Simons. We're going to be doing Psychic Sunday live, so you can come and get a New Year's Eve reading if you are not out partying or already so full of champagne that you can't actually call the phone. We're going to be talking about some astrology for the new year for bigger things, progressions happening with the world, but also doing some astrology and some, progressions for people. So come and see us on Psychic Sunday, New Year's Eve. We will be on live again. Until then, we're going back to H.P. Lovecraft, who is one of my favorite writers, one of Eric Markham's favorite writers. And I found a story, which to me is a psychic, and somebody who's, a long time ago, far, far away, did some psychotropic drugs. Not a lot, just a few. My situation is I had more interesting things happen because I was an abductee and had aliens working on kind of preparing me to be able to see things and do things intuitively, that I saw a lot of weird stuff. And there's a story that I have called From Beyond. And as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, how the heck did H.P. Lovecraft know what it was like to see things that other people don't see? And Eric, I'm wondering if you can speak to this at all for us.
I'm not sure now there are, believe it or not, there are people who think that the Necronomicon, which was, H.P. Lovecraft's literary invention, that was the book of all the evil magic ever written. There are people that honestly believe that the Necronomicon is real and that H.P. Lovecraft wasn't making this stuff up. He was fictionalizing it to try to awaken everybody. And there's a cult of people that, actually think that there is a Cthulhu, that there are the great old ones, that, there's, that the man was plugged into a truth that, nobody's willing to admit to, and with good reason. I mean, if his vision was true, God, what a horrible, what a horrible existence. Who'd actually would really want to. I think what it is, he was so far out there that I don't think it was so much prescience or personal experience. I think he pushed the envelope so far that it took, 60 years for the envelope to catch up to him. And I think now with the abductee experience and more people coming out about that, the truth is, they always talk about life imitates art, etc. I think it just he pushed the boundary out there so far that we're just now catching up to the boundary he had set. And that's why you read something, it's like, wow, how could he imagine this? That's just it. He imagined it. And the truth finally caught up with him.
Well, it is interesting because in the story that I'm going to share called From Beyond, he is literally telling a story like people I know who've done acid. I never ever did acid. I was always a good girl. So, the weirdest thing I ever had was when aliens worked on my head with light and I saw things going through walls and I saw things around people that other people didn't see for about a week. And then I did mushrooms and then I saw some weird stuff. But I never really had an acid trip. But I've listened to a lot of people who had acid trips. And in this story From Beyond, I'm thinking about friends I knew who would go to Dead concerts and they'd end up dropping acid with somebody they shouldn't drop acid with. And I'm reading From Beyond and I'm like, this is a story about somebody who is dropping acid with like the worst person they could possibly ever drop acid with, somebody who wants to kill them. And I'm like, how did he know? They didn't have acid back then, did they? They didn't, because I know that they were researching it in like the 50s, and it didn't exist. So what was there that could have been similar to opium or
psilocybin? What? Well, psilocybin mushrooms and peyote were known.
That's true.
Keeping in mind that opium was not a controlled substance. Coca-Cola originally had cocaine in it. It was supposed to be a drink that, kind of gave you a pick-me-up. Opium, you could go, laudanum. For the longest time, you could go to a drugstore and buy a bottle of laudanum. In fact, that's how they used to keep children quiet. You'd put laudanum in their formula. And Junior wouldn't cry because he was taking an opium trip. And, opium can have some pretty hallucinatory. I can't remember if I ever read if he ever did opium or if he looked on that as so wildly, or I think I read both ways. One, somebody said he did, and another one they said it was too much. His xenophobia and the attachment that opium had with foreign cultures would have kept him from it. But having been an Anglophile, and so many of the great English authors have been, being opium users, it's probably, a given that he probably sampled it at least once. And it might have opened up his, gateways of perception to give him some of this weird ideas.
Well, it's funny because to me the way he writes about it is literally not having done anything that was so heavily hallucinatory. Yeah, shrooms, I had some hallucinations that were pretty good, but I have heard people having bad trips and paranoia, and this is like a bad trip paranoia situation, but really also interesting because he brings in, and theosophy was around and the pineal gland stuff was around at the time this was written, and he's writing about stimulating the pineal gland and doing it scientifically with a machine, but it also, as an intuitive, it speaks to that for me because, I originally, I don't believe I was given any drug. Mine was stimulated by a machine that used light in a way to grow neuronal pathways. So this is very interesting to me because it's also like an abduction, but it's also like a psychotropic drug, and it's also like a lot of other things that in 1920 you wouldn't necessarily think that people were playing about with, but yet here we have H.P. Lovecraft writing about it. So I'm going to play my recording, and this will be a little louder recording than the others, so I hope just adjust your headphones, etc., as needed for this one. This is From Beyond. From Beyond, written 16th November 1920. Horrible beyond conception was the change which had taken place in my best friend, Crawford Tillinghast. I had not seen him since that day 2 months and a half before, when he had told me toward what goal his physical and metaphysical researches were leading, when he had answered my odd and almost frightened remonstrances by driving me from his laboratory and his house in a burst of fanatical rage. I had known that he now remained mostly shut in the attic laboratory with that accursed electrical machine, eating little and excluding even the servants, but I had not thought that a brief period of 10 weeks could so alter and disfigure any human creature. It is not pleasant to see a stout man suddenly grown thin, and it is even worse when the baggy skin becomes yellowed or grayed, the eyes sunken, circled, and uncannily glowing, the forehead veined and corrugated, and the hands tremulous and twitching, and if added to this there be a repellent unkemptness, a wild disorder of dress, a bushiness of dark hair white at the roots, and an unchecked growth of pure white beard on a face once clean-shaven, the cumulative effect of this is all quite shocking. But such was the aspect of Crawford Tillinghast on the night his half-coherent message brought me to his door after my weeks of exile, such the spectre that trembled as it admitted me, candle in hand, and glanced furtively over its shoulder as if fearful of unseen things in the ancient lonely house set back from Benevolent Street. That Crawford Tillinghast should have ever studied science and philosophy was a mistake. These things should be left to the frigid and impersonal investigator, for they offer two equally tragic alternatives to the man of feeling and action: despair if he fail in his quest, and terrors unutterable and unimaginable if he succeed. Tillinghast had once been the prey of failure, solitary and melancholy, but now I knew, with nauseating fears of my own, that he was the prey of success. I had indeed warned him 10 weeks before, when he burst forth with his tale of what he felt himself about to discover. He had been flushed and excited then, talking in a high and unnatural, though always pedantic, voice. "What do we know," he had said, "of the world and the universe about us? Our means of receiving impressions are absurdly few, and our notions of surrounding objects infinitely narrow. We see only things as we are constructed to see them, and can gain no idea of their absolute nature. With 5 feeble senses we pretend to comprehend the boundlessly complex cosmos, yet other beings with a wider, stronger, or different range of senses might not only see very differently the things we see, but might see and study whole worlds of matter, energy, and life which lie close at hand, yet can never be detected with the senses we have. I have always believed that such strange and inaccessible worlds exist at our very elbows, and now I believe I have found a way to break down the barriers. I am not joking. Within 24 hours, that machine near the table will generate waves acting on unrecognized sense organs that exist in us as atrophied and rudimentary vestiges. Those waves will open up to us many vistas unknown to man, and several unknown to anything we consider organic life. We shall see that at which dogs howl in the dark, and that at which cats prick up their ears after midnight. We shall see these things, and other things which no breathing creature has yet seen. We shall overleap time and space and dimensions, and without bodily motion peer to the bottom of creation. When Tillinghast said these things, I remonstrated, for I knew him well enough to be frightened rather than amused. But he was a fanatic, and drove me from the house. Now he was no less a fanatic, but his desire to speak had conquered his resentment, and he had written me imperatively in a hand I could scarcely recognize. As I entered the abode of the friend so suddenly metamorphosed to a shivering gargoyle, I became infected with a terror which seemed stalking in all the shadows. The words and beliefs expressed 10 weeks before seemed bodied forth in the darkness beyond the small circle of candlelight, and I sickened at the hollow, altered voice of my host. I wished the servants were about, and did not like it when he said they had all left 3 days previously. It seemed strange that old Gregory, at least, should desert his master without telling a friend as tried and true as I. It was he who had given me all the information I had of Tillinghast after I was repulsed in rage. Yet I soon subordinated all my fears to my growing curiosity and fascination. Just what Crawford Tillinghast now wished of me I could only guess, but that he had become and had some stupendous secret of discovery to impart, I could not doubt. Before I had protested his unnatural pryings into the unthinkable. Now that he had evidently succeeded to some degree, I almost shared his spirit, terrible though the cost of victory appeared. Up through the dark emptiness of the house, I followed the bobbing candle in the hand of this shaking parody on man. The electricity seemed to be turned off, and when I asked my guide, he said it was for a definite reason. It would be too much. I would not dare. I would not dare, he continued to mutter. I especially noted his new habit of muttering, for it was not like him to talk to himself. We entered the laboratory in the attic, and I observed that detestable electrical machine, glowing with a sickly, sinister violet luminosity. It was connected with a powerful chemical battery, but seemed to be receiving no current, for I recalled that in its experimental stage it had sputtered and purred when in action. In reply to my question, Tillinghast mumbled that this permanent glow was not electrical in any sense that I could understand. He now seated me near the machine, so that it was on my right, and turned a switch somewhere below the crowning cluster of glass bulbs. The usual sputtering began, turned to a whine, and terminated in a drone so soft as to suggest a return to silence. Meanwhile the luminosity increased, waned again, then assumed a pale ultra-color or blend of colors, which I could neither place nor describe. Tillinghast had been watching me and noted my puzzled expression. "Do you know what that is?" he whispered. "That is ultraviolet." He chuckled oddly at my surprise. "You thought ultraviolet was invisible, and so it is, but can you see that? And many invisible things now. Listen to me. The waves from that thing are waking 1,000 sleeping senses in us, senses which we inherit from aeons of evolution, from the state of detached electrons to the state of organic humanity. I have seen truth, and I intend to show it to you. Do you wonder how it will seem? I will tell you." Here Tillinghast seated himself directly opposite me, blowing out his candle and staring hideously into my eyes. "Your existing sense organs, ears first, I think, will pick up many of the impressions, for they are closely connected to the dormant organs. Then there will be others. You have heard of the pineal gland? I laugh at the shallow endocrinologist, fellow dupe and fellow parvenu of the Freudian. That gland is the great sense organ of organs, and I have found it. It is like sight in the end, and transmits visual pictures to the brain. If you are normal, that is the way you ought to get most out of it. I mean, get the most evidence from beyond." I looked about the immense attic room with the sloping south wall. Dimly lit by rays, which the everyday eye cannot see, the far corners were all shadows, and the whole place took on a hazy unreality which obscured its nature, and invited the imagination to symbolism and phantasm. During the interval that Tillinghast was silent, I fancied myself in some vast and incredible temple of long-dead gods, some vague edifice of innumerable black stone columns reaching up from the floor of damp slabs to a cloudy height beyond the range of my vision. The picture was very vivid for a while, but gradually gave way to a more horrible conception, that of utter, absolute solitude in infinite sightless, soundless space. There seemed to be a void, and nothing more, and I felt a childish fear which prompted me to draw from my hip pocket the revolver I always carried after dark since the night I was held up in East Providence. Then, from the farthermost regions of remoteness, the sound softly glided into existence. It was infinitely faint, subtly vibrant, and unmistakably musical, but held a quality of surpassing wildness which made its impact feel like a delicate torture of my whole body. I felt sensations like those one feels when accidentally scratching ground glass. Simultaneously, there developed something like a cold draft, which apparently swept past me from the direction of the distant sound. As I waited breathlessly, I perceived that both sound and wind were increasing, the effect being to give me an odd notion of myself as tied to a pair of rails in the path of a gigantic approaching locomotive. I began to speak to Tillinghast, and as I did so, all the unusual impressions abruptly vanished. I saw only the man, the glowing machine, and the dim apartment. Tillinghast was grinning repulsively at the revolver, which I had almost unconsciously drawn, but from his expression I was sure he had seen and heard as much as I, if not a great deal more. I whispered what I had experienced, and he bade me to remain as quiet and receptive as possible. "Don't move," he cautioned, "for in these rays we are able to be seen as well as to see. I told you the servants left, but I didn't tell you how. It was that thick-witted housekeeper. She turned on the lights downstairs after I had warned her not to, and the wires picked up sympathetic vibrations. It must have been frightful. I could hear the screams up here in spite of all I was seeing and hearing from another direction, and later it was rather awful to find those empty heaps of clothing around the house. Mrs. Updike's clothes were close to the front hall switch. That's how I know she did it. It got them all. But so long as we don't move, we're fairly safe. Remember, we're dealing with a hideous world in which we are practically helpless. Keep still." The combined shock of the revelation and of the abrupt command gave me a kind of paralysis, and in my terror my mind again opened to the impressions coming from what Tillinghast called beyond. I was now in a vortex of sound and motion, with confused pictures before my eyes. I saw the blurred outlines of the room, but from some point in space there seemed to be pouring a seething column of unrecognizable shapes or clouds penetrating the solid roof at a point ahead and to the right of me. Then I glimpsed the temple-like effect again. But this time the pillars reached up into an aerial ocean of light, which sent down one blinding beam along the path of the cloudy column I had seen before. After that, the scene was almost wholly kaleidoscopic, and in the jumble of sights, sounds, and unidentified sense impressions, I felt that I was about to dissolve or in some way lose the solid form. One definite flash I shall always remember. I seemed for an instant to behold a patch of strange night sky filled with shining revolving spheres, and as it receded, I saw that the glowing suns formed a constellation or galaxy of settled shape, this shape being the distorted face of Crawford Tillinghast. At another time I felt the huge, animate things brushing past me, and occasionally walking or drifting through my supposedly solid body, and thought I saw Tillinghast look at them, as though his better-trained senses could catch them visually. I recalled what he had said of the pineal gland, and I wondered what he saw with his preternatural eye. Suddenly I myself became possessed of a kind of augmented sight. Over and above the luminous and shadowy chaos arose a picture which, though vague, held the elements of a consistency and permanence. It was indeed somewhat familiar, for the unusual part was superimposed upon the usual terrestrial scene, much as a cinema view may be thrown upon the painted curtain of a theatre. I saw the attic laboratory, the electrical machine, and the unsightly form of Tillinghast opposite me, but of all the space unoccupied by familiar material objects, not one particle was vacant. Indescribable shapes, both alive and otherwise, were mixed in a disgusting disarray, and close to every known thing were whole worlds of alien, unknown entities. It likewise seemed that all the known things entered into the composition of other unknown things, and vice versa. Foremost among the living objects were great inky jellyfish monstrosities, which flabbily quivered in harmony with the vibrations of the machine. They were present in loathsome profusion, and I saw to my horror that they overlapped, that they were semi-fluid and capable of passing through one another and through what we know as solids. These things were never still, but seemed ever floating about with some malignant purpose. Sometimes they appeared to devour one another, the attacker launching itself at its victim and instantaneously obliterating the latter from sight. Shudderingly, I felt that I knew what had obliterated the unfortunate servants, and I could not exclude the things from my mind as I strove to observe other properties of the newly visible world that lies unseen around us. But Tillinghast had been watching me and was speaking. "You see them? You see them? You see the things that float and flop around you and through you every moment of your life? You see the creatures that form what men call the pure air and the blue sky? Have I not succeeded in breaking down the barrier? Have I not shown you worlds that no other living men have seen?" I heard him scream through the horrible chaos, and looked at the wild face thrust so offensively close to mine. His eyes were pits of flame, and they glared at me with what I now saw was overwhelming hatred. The machine droned detestably. "You think those floundering things wiped out the servants? Fool, they are harmless. But the servants are gone, aren't they? You tried to stop me. You discouraged me when I needed every drop of encouragement I could get. You were afraid of the cosmic truth, you damned coward. But now I've got you. What swept up the servants? What made them scream so loud? Don't know, eh? Well, you'll know soon enough. Look at me. Listen to what I say. Do you suppose there are really any such thing as time and magnitude? Do you fancy there are such things as form or matter? I tell you, I have struck depths that your little brain can't picture. I have seen beyond the bounds of infinity and drawn down demons from the stars. I have harnessed the shadows that stride from world to sow death and madness. Space belongs to me, do you hear? Things are hunting me now, the things that devour and dissolve, but I know how to elude them. It is you they will get, as they got the servants. Stirring, dear sir. I told you it was dangerous to move. I have saved you so far by telling you to keep still, saved you to see more sights and to listen to me. If you had moved, they would have been at you long ago. Don't worry. They won't hurt you. They didn't hurt the servants. It was seeing that made the poor devils scream so. My pets are not pretty, for they come out of places where aesthetic standards are very different. Disintegration is quite painless, I assure you, but I want you to see them. I almost saw them, but I knew how to stop. You are not curious? I always knew you were no scientist, trembling with anxiety to see the ultimate things I have discovered. Why don't you move, then?
Tired? Well, don't worry, my friend, for they are coming. Look! Look, curse you, look! Just over your left shoulder. What remains to be told is very brief, and may be familiar to you from the newspaper accounts. The police heard a shot in the old Tillinghast house and found us there, Tillinghast dead and me unconscious. They arrested me because the revolver was in my hand, but released me in 3 hours after they found it was apoplexy which had finished Tillinghast, and saw that my shot had been directed at the noxious machine which now lay hopelessly shattered on the laboratory floor. I did not tell very much of what I had seen, for I feared the coroner would be skeptical, but from the evasive outline I did give, the doctor told me that I had undoubtedly been hypnotized by the vindictive and homicidal madman. I wish I could believe that, doctor. It would help my shaky nerves if I could dismiss what I now have to think of the air and the sky about and above me. I never feel alone or comfortable, and a hideous sense of pursuit sometimes comes chillingly on me when I am weary. What prevents me from believing the doctor is this one simple fact, that the police never found the bodies of those servants whom they say Crawford Tillinghast murdered.
Yeah, that's a bad trip. Right there. Crawford Tillinghast. Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. And, servants eaten and dissolved by unseen things. Enough to give you a Christmas Eve nightmare. And, so think of better things than that. I did forget to give the password earlier. Joe Allgaier set the password. It was booty. So, for those of you in the SOR Space Travelers chat room, the password is booty. For everybody else, the password's booty. Use your password wisely tonight and in the new year. Because, you never want to misuse your booty. Eric, do you got a story for us, dude?
Yeah.
Yeah. What you got?
Well, let me cut the sound off on that. Okay. This is more of a sort of a, not so much a story, but it was one of H.P. Lovecraft's attempts at a open, what's the word? Open phrase, open meter poetry.
Okay.
So it's got if I can read it right, it's going to have a little more flow to it. It's not going to be quite like his standard prose, but it's still very much an open rhyme scheme.
Okay.
Oops. All right, this is called Azathoth by H.P. Lovecraft. When age fell upon the world, and wonder went out of the minds of men, when gray cities reared to smoky skies tall towers, grim and ugly, in whose shadow none might dream of the sun or of spring's flowering meads, when learning stripped earth of her mantle of beauty, and poets sang no more save of twisted phantoms, seen with bleared and inward-looking eyes, when these things had come to pass, and childish hopes had gone away forever, there was a man who traveled out of life on a quest into the spaces whither the world's dreams had fled. Of the name and abode of this man but little is written, for they were of the waking world only. Yet it is said that both were obscure. It is enough to know that he dwelt in a city of high walls where sterile twilight reigned, and that he toiled all day among shadow and turmoil, coming home at evening to a room whose one window opened not on the fields and groves, but on a dim court where other windows stared in dull despair. From that casement one might see only walls and windows, except sometimes when one leaned far out and peered aloft at the small stars that passed. And because mere walls and windows must soon drive to madness a man who dreams and reads much, the dweller in that room used night after night to lean out and peer aloft to glimpse some fragment of things beyond the waking world and the grayness of tall cities. After years, he began to call the slow-sailing stars by name, and to follow them in fancy when they glided regretfully out of sight, till at length his vision opened to many secret vistas whose existence no common eye suspects. And one night a mighty gulf was bridged, and the dream-haunted sky swelled down to the lonely watcher's window to merge with the close air of his room and make him part of their fabulous wonder. There came to that room wild streams of violet midnight, glittering with gold, vortices of dust and fire swirling out of the ultimate spaces, and heavy with perfumes from beyond the worlds. Opiate oceans poured there, litten by suns that the eye may never behold, and having in their whirlpools strange dolphins and sea nymphs of unrememberable depths. Noiseless infinity eddied around the dreamer and wafted him away without even touching the body that leaned stiffly from the lonely window. And for days not counted in men's calendars, the tides of far spheres bear him gently to join the dreams for which he longed, the dreams that men have lost. And in the course of many cycles they tenderly left him sleeping on a green sunrise shore, a green shore fragrant with lotus blossoms and starred by red camelots. So you can tell by the end of that he was getting kind of fed up with the dreariness of the turn of the century industrial revolution as it was.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of Lord Dunsany in that. That's one of the reasons I picked that, because there's a similar story that Dunsany wrote about a guy who he starts to let his imagination, he goes from this stiff clerk to this guy who would, sort of let his imagination run wild. And eventually his dream world becomes his reality. And at the end, he's in a mental institution. His body is in a mental institution. But the soul of the man himself is in that, that new alternate reality that his fancy more or less invented and dragged him to.
Really, really impactful. And I'm just wondering if you've got another, or if we should look for another before we leave this.
Well, I have the complete and unabridged works right there in the break room I can go get. I think, or we can talk about what he's trying to get across.
Yeah. Well, what do you think he was trying to get across? I never think about it that way. I'm just like, wow, this is cool. See, somebody in the chat room said I was an intellectual, and I'm disproving that. I think it was Christopher. Not an intellectual. I don't respond to things intellectually. I would never make a great English teacher in any way, shape, or form. But in a lot of, certain things speak to me on multiple levels about his work. That there are multiple ways that you can be horrified or impacted by situations. And I don't remember seeing that many authors before him, and maybe you have, because you've read a lot, of Lord Dunsany and Edward Plunkett, who are writing on so many different levels. I think that Tolkien did, I think that C.S. Lewis did, because they also wrote about fantasy and not necessarily, well, C.S. Lewis even wrote sci-fi, but he wrote religious sci-fi. But he's, in like Paralandra and the Screwtape Letters, he's writing on multiple levels about multiple things and multiple ways in which a person can be horrified by something or be impacted by something. And that's what really struck me the first time I read Lovecraft, was that there were things operating on so many different levels. And I don't know, what do you think about that?
Well, I see the bleed. It's almost like he is foretelling to me, and this is just because I'm cynical and hate humanity. Sorry, humanity. No, but I see the world that he is describing a lot like what we have now, where people are, we work, or their noses. They're watching the world through their iPhones. They're not engaged. All they're doing is toiling to buy electronics, to experience life through the dreamer has been. What are you beating on? The dreamer has been, just shunned because he's not, dreaming is just stupid. You don't want to be a dreamer, that kind of thing. So what I see in this open verse poem is one guy dares to dream and to try and get in touch with, that dream-like, that childlike innocence that's gone, and his reward is, more or less, he's taken to where the dreams are now. And he doesn't have to worry about the toil and the grubbiness of the city and the way things are, just turned into like human stockyards.
Yeah, and what's interesting is at that time, or during the time that he grew up, the Industrial Revolution was in full swing, and there was grubbiness of stockyards. There was grubbiness of coal and terrible diseases, and just a general sort of wanting to shut out. Now, he did write a story called Beyond the Wall of Sleep, and this kind of speaks to what you're talking about a little bit, I think, and I'll read part of it. And it was written in the spring of 1919, and he uses a quote from Shakespeare: "I have an exposition of sleep come upon me." And in this, it's a little bit longer, so I'll read part of it. "I have frequently wondered if the majority of mankind ever paused to reflect upon the occasionally titanic significance of dreams, and of the obscure world to which they belong. Whilst the greater number of our nocturnal visions are perhaps no more than faint and fantastic reflections of our waking experiences, Freud, to the contrary, with his puerile symbolism, there are still a certain remainder whose immundane and ethereal character permits of no ordinary interpretation, and whose vaguely exciting and disquieting effect suggest possible minute glimpses into a sphere of mental existence no less important than physical life, yet separated from that life by an all but impassable barrier. From my experience, I cannot doubt but that man, when lost to terrestrial consciousness, is indeed sojourning in another and uncorporal life of a far different nature from the life we know, and of which only the slightest and most indistinct memories linger after waking. From those blurred and fragmentary memories we may infer much, yet prove little. We may guess that in dreams life, matter and vitality as the earth knows such things are not necessarily constant, and that time and space do not exist as our waking selves comprehend them, sometimes I believe that this less material life is our truer life, and that our vain presence on this terraqueous globe is itself the secondary or merely virtual phenomenon. Okay, Eric, remember when you were doing spirit mediumship and you had the frog thing happen and it was totally outside of time?
Okay, yeah.
Okay. I mean, he's saying we may guess that in dreams, life, matter, and vitality, as the earth knows such things, are not necessarily constant, and that time and space do not exist as our waking selves comprehend them. You know, he is really speaking about something different, that perhaps in the consciousness, you know, all time happens now. And you could be taking, you know, great travels in your dreams to fantastic places that actually exist, and take longer to get to than you could ever possibly get to in your body. Even though, again, this was really before anybody knew about Einstein. He had come up with this theory, but he hadn't really published it widely. So, I don't know. He knew some stuff. I mean, even just with that, he knew some stuff.
Well, I think he devoured literature. Like he had to be reminded to eat. People would see him walking down the street, and part of it was affectation. You know, he wanted to look gaunt, but some of it was really a matter of he would not eat because he would get involved in reading and studying. You know, the man was a voracious, you know, consumer of knowledge. So he read, you know, all the best metaphysical books of his day. He read any scientific journal that he could get his hands on to any, you know, that anything he could get a hold of. So he was well aware of, you know, current trends in psychology, psychiatry, you know, astronomy. You know, he was up to date on that stuff because he would literally rather read than eat. So I have no doubt that he would have, you know, been well aware of that kind of perceptual psychology of the day.
Well, and what's interesting is that this story is actually about psychology. It's about, as it goes on, it's about the psychology of a man who can't remember anything an hour after he does it. And he's the narrator of the story is his caretaker. He's an intern in a psychiatric place. So he's obviously been reading psychology when he writes this particular story. So that makes more sense when you think of it that way. I don't know. I mean, how cool would it be just to sit and read? Sometimes I think that the part of the sadness of the lives that we have, even though we're online and we're talking to people and we're doing stuff, is that, you know, there isn't enough just sitting and reading and digesting and creating out of what we read. And gosh, it must have been nice to be able to do that. Very, very nice.
That's pretty much all I do when I'm off. If I'm not working with Spaced Out Radio or working on a project for you or S4, I'm reading. I read, you know, I've got a book anywhere that I'm going to have an idle moment. The bed, the bathroom, you know, anywhere that I'm going to be where I'm not going to be in front, you know, writing or engaged on the computer, there's a book. I'm usually reading for, you know, one in my locker. So I'm usually reading a book or, you know, a book or three at any given time.
All right.
You know, this guy, if you want to look at the way this guy... Here's a quote by H.P. Lovecraft. It's one of my favorite things. And this is the man's life philosophy. This is his outlook. When he looks at a sunny day with daisies in the field and birds chirping, what I'm about to read y'all, is what the filter he sees it through. It begins, "The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents. We live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far. The sciences, each straining in its own direction, have hitherto harmed us little, but some day the piecing together of dissociated knowledge will open up such terrifying vistas of reality and of our frightful position therein, that we shall either go mad from revelation or flee from the light into the peace and safety of a new dark age." That is how the guy saw the world.
I think he's right. I mean, look at it. There is this whole kickback of discovery. You know, people who want to go back to a time, who look at, okay, they talk about the educated elite. You know, these are the people who are ruining the world, and you know, what I'd rather just do is not pay any attention to that whatsoever. I'd rather, this is not me personally, but, you know, the flat earthers, they want to go back to believing that the earth is flat. After we've had supposedly people on the moon and Mars rovers and Viking and everything else, we have people who really want all of that to be a conspiracy and go back to the earth being flat. This is 100 years later, and he's not wrong. He's totally not wrong. I don't even want to think about AI. I mean, you know, Joe Roop will do it. He'll put it on his show, and I'll put something on my show. But when it comes right down to it, do I want to think about that? No, not really. Do I want to think about what's going to happen when we get quantum computers that are working with fermions like the aliens have? Not really, especially not with AI. But yet it's all happening. Do I want to think about GMOs? No, I don't. I'd rather learn how to feed like the Sioux did. You know, for a long time I've wanted to go back. I don't know about you. Have you wanted to go back?
I'd like to go back to when the first Europeans settled or tried to settle in the North American continent and supply the Indians with AK-47s and just tell them flat out, see them pasty white sons of... Don't let a single one of them don't let them get a toehold.
Oh my gosh, it would be a much different world than Germs and Guns and Steel, or whatever that book was. Yeah, I mean, I really in the last 20 years wanted to go back to being native and, you know, make art, you know, hang out with animals. I think, you know, it's not so bad, that dark age. It's kind of an okay.
Well, I'm not sure how much of that, I mean, we get that because they made art. Somebody had the the time, but hunter-gathering, non-agrarian hunter-gathering, even agrarian culture, your butt is working a long day. That art was taking place at night, probably in the winter when it got dark fast. You know, the art and the culture was being passed on in the winter, but because there was no TV and it was too cold to be out hunting or tending your plot.
Yeah.
That would be enough. But I'm not altogether sure that was a bad thing.
It wasn't. All right, well, it's Christmas Eve or Christmas morning, depending on where you're at. We are going to be signing off here shortly. This is Elizabeth Anglin, your Coast of Cosmic Passport. If you need to speak to me, look for my email, info@ElizabethAnglin or ElizabethAnglin.com. Next week, I'll be back with Paul Simons. Joe Roop will be in on Saturday. Tomorrow, we have a Spaced Out Radio replay day, and then Dave Scott will be back. So, for all of you who've been listening tonight, thank you so much for doing so. We will see you next week here again on Sunday. Good night, everybody. Happy Christmas. Happy New Year. Take care.